Bigger, Chapter 6, Part 2, page 50, second paragraph. Tyler remembered pictures he had seen of Lincoln. Mr. Blackburn was fair-minded in class and displayed photographs of both Mr. Lincoln and Jefferson Davis, the President of the Confederacy. A deep grief showed in both men's eyes, as if they regretted doing what they had set their hearts and minds to do. But the stranger who had stopped by Sweet Creek made no mention of Lincoln dying. Either he didn't know himself, or the old woman was being fanciful again. Tyler was glad to find himself on the back stoop at last, in the sunshine, out of the house where death was happening, and where he had heard someone might have murdered the president. Before he turned to leave, the old woman handed him a jar with some leftover soup in it, a cloth tied over the top with a string. "Sorry I don't have a lid, son. You'll have to carry it upright till you eat it," she apologized. Tyler told her he was pleased to have it, no matter how he had to carry it, and turned south when he reached the road again. It seemed unbelievable that a president could be killed like an ordinary mortal. Such a man ought to be immune to the fate of regular folks. Lincoln dead? That man with somber gray eyes and tangled black hair, who'd kept the Union together in spite of men like Papa and Joe Shelby. Hard to believe. As he walked, Tyler watched in the thick weeds of the ditches and farther back in the trees for any sign that the devil dog was following him. He saw nothing, only some scrawny cows in a distant field. Perhaps the dog had a plan of its own. Maybe it was seeking the master who'd left it behind. In that case, it wouldn't keep tracking him any more. It was a thought that brought Tyler relief, and he walked along with a lighter heart. When night came, he once again searched for a snug campsite, and finally found one in a grove of trees set like an island in the middle of a wide meadow of waist-high wild timothy. He made himself a fresh bed of leaves and twigs, gathered dry, fallen branches for a fire, and settled himself down. Having already spent one night alone, he knew most of the nights to follow would be easier. There was no way he could heat the soup in the glass jar the old woman had given him, so he decided he'd have to eat it cold. No, wait. He could use Aunt Margaret's tin cup. Carefully, Tyler poured some of the soup into the cup, glad to see it contained a few pieces of meat. They were gray and tough. It must have been an old rooster that had ended up in the pot. He set the cup in the coals for several minutes, stirring the broth from time to time before he began to eat. Then he heard the sound. Tyler stopped slurping. Other than a cricket's chirp and the sound of an owl far away, he heard nothing more. He had been mistaken, he decided. He began to eat again. There came another muffled sound of footfalls through the meadow grass. This time Tyler knew it wasn't his imagination. He waited. The grass tops moved, but he couldn't see what made them tremble. They parted. Once again, there stood the devil dog. "You," Tyler said flatly. On hearing a human voice, he reflected an ordinary dog would react with a timid wag of its tail. This dog wagged nothing, didn't even lift an ear. There was something so serious and steady in its eyes that Tyler couldn't tear his own glance away. The dog's brown eye studied him warmly, almost affectionately, while the blue eye regarded him with cool suspicion. The dog sat, its front feet placed precisely together, its head held high so its white chest faced the fire, looking as if a muslin bib had been tied around its neck. Tyler observed that the dog's ears were rather soft and down-tipped, like a shepherd's dog's, but its muzzle was sharper, its forehead broader, like a wolf's might be, though his personal knowledge of wolves was limited to pictures he had seen in one of Mr. Blackburn's books at school. Its coat was neither sleek like Maggie's nor shaggy like a collie's. Instead, it was dense, about 2 inches thick, such as a bear cub's might be, except for its white bib. The dog was dark, not black exactly, more the charcoal color of a partially burned pine log. "You," Tyler said again. "Come around for another handout, I expect," he accused. He continued to slurp the old woman's thin soup, but left a third of it at the bottom of the cup and held back 2 bites of biscuit. He dunked the biscuit in the soup and pushed the cup toward the dog. The dog backed away with a soft snarl. Tyler moved around to the other side of the fire so the dog would feel freer to come close. The devil dog crept nearer, his belly low to the ground, until he reached the cup. In one quick gulp, soup and biscuit vanished. The dog licked both sides of his mouth, eager to catch any dribble that remained, then sat back on his haunches again. "Looks like you're an easy keeper," Tyler admitted with a sigh. "That's what Papa always said about Calico and Maggie. Those gals are easy keepers, son. Doesn't take much to make them happy," he'd say with a wink in Mama's direction. Had he meant Mama was an easy keeper too? "But you're bigger than I figured you were," the boy observed, "almost the size of a newborn calf." The dog's legs were shorter, of course, but lengthwise he seemed almost calf-size. "Yes, bigger than I thought you'd be," Tyler mused. "Bigger." "If you're going to show up for supper every night," Tyler told the dog, "you might as well have a name you can answer to." The dog seemed to listen carefully to his words. "Can't call you Dog," Tyler pointed out. "That's no fit name. Can't call you Blackie because you're wearing that fancy white bib, and aren't true black besides." He searched his mind. "You're bigger than I thought you'd be. What do you think of bigger?" On the other side of the fire, the dog didn't say yes or no to the suggestion, but when Tyler lay down on his pallet, he called across the dying coals, "Bigger? You can stay here all night if you want to, Bigger." Maybe Uncle Matt was wrong. There didn't seem to be a devil inside the dog after all. "It was God who gave you those queer eyes," Tyler reasoned aloud. Doesn't have to mean there's something wicked about you, does it, Bigger?" He'd say the name often, he decided, until the dog got used to it. The dog seemed to understand how things were going to be now, and finally stretched himself full length beside the fire with a tired sigh. He closed his eyes as he'd done the night before, and after a time, so did Tyler. When the boy woke in the morning, the dog was still there, wide awake, watching him expectantly. What would you name the title of Chapter 6?